I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. This is where we take the big resiliency research and best practices and break it down into small, bite-sized pieces that you can begin using immediately to strengthen yourself and others. What if you could learn from a documentary filmmaker who captured a notorious scandal that rocked the nation and brought forth powerful lessons? Would you spend the next 28 minutes with us? What if in the next 10 minutes you could watch footage of a corrupt judge who broke his oath and imprisoned over 3,000 young teens and adolescents for minor offenses? It will change what you want for these kids. Would you hang out with us? Who is us? My other half today is Robert May, film producer, director, and founder of SenArt Films. I first met Robert when we shared the stage at a justice conference out east, and I was so taken by his work that I asked him to come and be a speaker at the annual conference for the National Resilience Institute. While he was in town, I grabbed him for a show. So here he is. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
Your company has a unique name, SenArt Films. What's the background?
Well, the idea is that, when I was a kid, I always wanted to make movies that would literally affect an audience. And I had dreamed literally of sitting in an audience in the back, watching how they responded to a story that I was responsible for helping to bring to the screen. Mm-hmm. And so it comes from sensory art, literally. And, to try to affect all the senses, or as many of them as possible, about who we are and how people are affected emotionally. It could be happy or sad, but senses nonetheless. Okay.
Well, I just came from the conference where I watched the faces and I heard the responses to your talk and watching some of your film. You certainly achieved that mission with Kids for Cash, this movie. How did this project come into being?
Well, Kids for Cash actually started out as what I thought was a story about a scandal, literally a scandal where two seemingly corrupt judges took millions of dollars, as it was alleged, certainly in the press, that they took millions of dollars in exchange for putting kids into private, for-profit juvenile detention centers. And that intrigued me, and I thought, so this is going to be a story about a scandal. And it was going to have victims, and it was going to have a villain. It's like you couldn't write a better script like that, and it's about power and greed, and so that's literally what piqued my interest.
Yeah, I can see that. And when this story broke, it broke, and I know I perhaps paid more attention. I used to live in Pennsylvania, and this was happening in your backyard in Pennsylvania and near where we used to live. But it hit across the country, and I think we have some footage of some news coverage. So take a look at when the scandal broke.
Former Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella faces charges tonight.
Prosecutors say he ruined countless young lives, sending children to jails in return for cash.
Two judges in Pennsylvania pleaded guilty today to taking huge payoffs to send teenagers to privately run detention centers.
Former judges Mark Chivarella and Michael Conahan arrived at the federal courthouse.
Prosecutors accused them of sending juveniles to a privately run detention center.
The evidence against the former judges was compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation
in a scandal known as Kids for Cash.
A Kids for Cash scheme. Dodgy judges are getting payback from the private sector.
$2.6 million in kickbacks
in return for sentencing kids to juvenile detention. Folks, that's not a bribe. I call that a justice bonus.
Young offenders, often with no prior record, were brought before these judges for charges as minor as writing prank notes.
I don't deserve this. I mean, I'm not a criminal.
These people are wolves in sheep's clothing because the kids trust these people. The people in this county trusted this guy.
So this Judge Chivarella was known as taking a zero tolerance policy on crime. And before you were exposed to this project, you said you thought that was a good thing.
I did. I'm a parent of two kids, and who are now 19 and 16. But Judge Chivarella, I mean, I live in the community that the scandal happened, but I've never done a project that was anywhere close to my community because we're based in New York. But he had a policy of zero tolerance and said that if you come before me, this is Judge Chivarella, for a so-called crime that's committed, that he would send kids and adults away. And in a community, you want to live in a safe community. And what's wrong with zero tolerance? After all, we're not going to tolerate bad behavior from adults or kids. Until I really understood what zero tolerance really meant. It means no tolerance. It means black or white. And certainly the film and the research in the film and filming the kids and so forth has changed my whole belief system, because I believe that we live in a world, a gray world, like our whole existence lives in this gray zone. And then there's different levels. There are people who put their toe over the line of good and evil and pull right back because it feels bad, and they don't do that again. And there are other people that completely fall over and fall into the world of evil, if you will. And I think that society tends to judge people who make a mistake, whether it be kids or adults, as just pure evil, falling over the line, and the only way we'll keep it from happening is to have very tough laws, and it's because it'll scare people from ever breaking the law, except it really doesn't work for kids at all.
And so how else this has changed how you parent? How has making this film impacted you personally?
Well, it's funny because I would sort of speak at my kids before this. I would tell them, don't do that. This is what'll happen. There'll be consequences for this or that. Expecting them to completely understand what I'm saying, but realizing only that they don't really get it. It's if you do this, this will happen, and they're like, oh yeah, of course I get it. But I didn't know that a kid's brain's not fully developed until in their mid-20s. I mean, it's one of those aha moments when you find out that a kid's brain's not fully developed, and particularly the parts that aren't developed are their frontal lobe, which affects judgment and risk-taking ability, and so forth. So as a parent, I decided to more or less respect them as being kids, which I didn't do. I was always disrespecting them, if you will, because they weren't doing the things that I, as an adult, wanted them to do. And what I've learned is to have respect for them as kids instead. It's a big difference when you adopt that point of view, because all of a sudden it takes a certain stress level away too. You're looking at things differently. Yeah.
And that's such great advice for parents, for teachers, for practitioners, that kids are not mini adults.
That's right.
And our audience has heard this from different people, but as a parent perspective, that's really powerful. So thank you for that. So here's tool number 1, your takeaway. Zero tolerance policies can mask real needs and even systemize intolerance. Be wary of any hardline sense of justice. The riveting Kids for Cash trailer, you get to watch it when we come back. Hi, this is Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. We are talking with Robert May, director, producer of the Kids for Cash movie. Now that you've heard some background, or if you're just joining us, it's a great time because we are about to show the trailer to the movie, and you don't want to miss this. Here it is.
She was a good kid. She was happy.
I was known for being the jokester.
Eddie, he was always a fireball.
We were talking about how funny it would be if we made a fake MySpace page about my vice principal.
I was trying to stay out of trouble. That's when everything started.
Whatever sins you have committed, you can't go back and undo it.
Chivarella was a no-nonsense, zero-tolerance judge. He always jailed kids.
You are going to experience prison. I'll be glad to put you there.
The way Chivarella ran the courtroom, you could have had F. Lee Bailey there, and the kids would have gone away.
There's a mechanism that takes over that keeps kids in that system.
No one listened because we were kids.
There was never any instance of guilt or innocence. They were locking him up.
Really high number of kids appearing without counsel.
We have no rights. He's in their custody now.
It is unbelievable. We're talking about children.
I wanted them to be scared out of their minds. I don't understand how that was a bad thing.
Former Luzerne County judge faces charges tonight
in a scandal known as Kids for Cash.
$2.6 million
in return for sentencing kids to juvenile detention.
I'd never send a kid away for a penny. I'm not this mad judge who was just putting them in shackles, throwing kids away.
He went there as a free-spirited kid. He came out a hardened man, I would say.
Here I was saying we can trust that judge to be fair, and that's not what happened.
I was scared every day.
I was only 14. All those years I missed.
This is not a cash for kids case.
This is my man! You ruined my life!
I still wake up from nightmares.
That is so riveting, Robert. I know the question on many people's minds, and we're going to talk about the substance of it, but how can they see the whole movie?
Well, they can see it on Netflix here or around the world. It's available to stream. You can get a DVD on Netflix too, of course. You can see it on iTunes, Amazon Prime, Hulu, literally every streaming platform it's available and has been.
Wonderful. And you also do larger screenings for communities as well.
We do. Well, the film came out theatrically, and it had its theatrical run, and then came out on DVD and Netflix and so forth. But still, communities bring the film in to screen, often for particular community organizations or colleges and universities or high schools, middle schools, because it's amazing to watch a community literally see the film and see what the dialogue is after they see the film. I've been present in many of them, and people have a lot to say after they see the film because it's not what people expect.
Right. And like I said, that was just going on at our conference today, so I just witnessed that. And your website has all that information where people can get information.
It does. They can go to kidsforcashthemovie.com, and there's information about where they can get the film and how they can bring it to their community. And there's other stories about the kids, and there's a lot of information there. There's also a help guide, literally, for where people can turn in their communities to point them in the right direction if they have an issue within the justice system.
Good. And we're going to get talking about that policy and that substance. One burning question I have in the meantime, how did you get Judge Ciavarella to talk to you, to cooperate in this?
Well, that's a spoiler alert. Because, right, so the audiences that see the film for the first time don't know that. But partway in the movie, the judge is revealed, and the story, we actually tell the story from both the villain and the victim's point of view, literally, and where we had access to both of the judges as they were going through federal prosecution for taking millions of dollars. The judges' lawyers didn't know that they were being filmed, and neither did prosecutors. We just followed the story as it was unfolding, from the judge's point of view, the so-called villains, and from the kids' point of view and their families, the so-called victims. And the story literally intertwines between their two lives.
And we've talked about how this film has impacted you. Let's shift and talk about what you've learned from this project. What are some of the lessons that have come forth?
I would say one word that comes to mind is sort of hypocrisy, how we in communities, including me, say one thing, this is what we want and what we expect of our community, and when it comes to kids, we forget that we were kids once too. And part of the way we learn right from wrong is by making mistakes. And I think if we're too tough on kids' mistakes, and this could be for a variety of things that kids may do, if we're too tough, we can literally crush the spirit of a kid and also keeps them from learning what we really want them to learn is right from wrong. I mean, when we trade in compassion for what could be perceived as cruelty in a way, in the way that sometimes harsh treatment of kids can be, I think we've gone too far. I mean, we have to respect kids for being kids. Right. It's the biggest thing that I've learned.
And some of your lessons have gone well beyond Pennsylvania, because when you looked at the story beyond the kickbacks and the money, you found some patterns there. Tell us about those.
Well, in fact, it didn't take long during the original filming to realize that either this is just happening in this community or this is a systemic problem, because it was too big and the community had no issue about the zero tolerance policies in this particular community until they found out that money was involved. So there were so many people involved in handcuffing, shackling these kids and putting them away, sometimes for years, and the community knew it, and lots of people, there's a lot of court people that knew about it, and while a lot of the kids weren't represented by lawyers, there was a lawyer in every one of the prosecutions. The district attorney's office was there. And so we started doing more research, and we found that the kinds of things that were happening in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, were happening in communities all across the country, with the exception of money changing hands, which is why it wasn't talked about in a lot of other communities too. So when the film started to come out and people started to see it, they said, well, this is happening in our community too. Maybe not the money, but the way we're treating our kids. And no one really cared about how kids were being treated in the community, unless of course it was their child that got into the system somehow, largely through schools, which are how most kids get into the system.
And I think that's going to be an eye-opener for a lot of our viewers. So here's your second takeaway. Incarceration of adolescents and teens, most for non-violent crimes, is happening across the country, often supported by police, schools, and community members. Educate yourself about what's going on in your community. Up next, footage of a couple of the kids featured in the film. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today we are talking with Robert May, producer and director of the movie Kids for Cash. He tells stories of these kids and parents that are so compelling. I wanted to share some footage. Take a look.
The first day I walked into the courthouse, I already went in with a feeling that something big, unexpected is gonna happen. I'm already scared right from as soon as I got out of bed that morning. Like something's gonna happen to go see a guy with a lot of power. This may not be good for me.
We got to the court building and it's loaded. There's tons of people there. I didn't think anything of it. Like, I thought I was coming back home and everything.
The dome inside the old courthouse is just so big. It's like it was designed to make you feel small. It was designed to scare me. You know what I mean? And it worked.
We were literally in there a minute and a half at the most. The judge had already had everything in front of him.
All he did was look through some papers and he told me that I was a troubled kid, and I don't think I was.
It wasn't just the scooter. Judge Chivarell actually took into account that Charlie was having problems in school. How did he put it now? What this appears to be is parents that have lost control of a child, and he said, I think it's time for me to get this child back in control. And he said, Camp Adams, 90 days. And they shackled my son and took him away, and that was, they should not do that. They should not do that at all in front of a parent. That was the most horrible thing. I will never, ever forget that part of it.
All right, we'll give our viewers a minute to recompose. It's heart-wrenching to watch those stories. You have had some screenings in some pretty powerful places. I know you've been in D.C., the Department of Justice, the Department of Education, the White House. What is your message when you screen your film for those type of audiences?
Well, we've screened for a lot of advocates or people who think they're advocates for kids, who also focus on charts and graphs to get the word across to people that, you know, the way we're treating kids. And what we found was that hearing these kids' stories, this film is not like a typical documentary. There is no voiceover narration. There's no cards underneath. It's you hear from the kids and families and then the judges. Mm-hmm. And you get to see firsthand and feel firsthand what's happened to these kids. And so when we screen for members of Congress or the Department of Education or the Department of Justice, literally those folks have been affected by what they've seen, really affected, emotionally affected. Just like regular audiences, which I think is exactly what has to happen. Mm-hmm.
And so what changes have been made since the filming in the juvenile justice system?
Well, since the screening on Capitol Hill, Senator Casey from Pennsylvania introduced a bill on status offenses to literally not lock kids up for status offenses. In other words, small offenses such as curfew violations or probation violations and so forth. And literally credits the film for exposing his awareness to the issue. And it's now co-sponsored by Rand Paul, and it's making its way through. And again, they both reference the film and how impactful it was, which is hard and unusual for any sort of film project or book to do. And for the Department of Education, the idea there is for more schools to be aware of the need to create a partnership between kids and teachers and administrators so that they can start to literally talk with kids, not at kids. And that's one of the things that is slowly beginning to happen.
And are you seeing more relationships? In our work, we really advocate strong relationships between schools and police departments. Are you seeing those type of relationships as well?
It's a slow process because there are still lots of communities where they're very focused on, we don't know what to do with kids because kids are so rambunctious today. We have to show them that, there's a price to pay for their disrespect or their small things, so, we'll dissuade other kids from getting into certain kinds of trouble. And that part really doesn't work. What works is creating a partnership between the police, schools, and the kids, and the families, and the community itself.
So I know this film has changed you. I see that in you. We've talked about that. What additional changes would you like to be seen? I know you're happy with some progress, but what else?
Well, one of the things that we're working hard on, we're in a partnership with Scholastic, we're working together with them to be able to repurpose the film so that it is a learning tool with discussion guides and planning guides, and literally be able to bring it into schools all around the country at no cost to schools. And ultimately for me, I would love to see an additional curriculum, as this is important as reading, math, and writing, which teaches interpersonal relationships among kids and literally how to get along with kids, social interaction, that sort of thing. I mean, the federal government calls it social emotional learning, but I mean, there's a much simpler way to put it, and I think it should be as important as those other things, because bottom line is, it's the one skill kids going to have going forward. They're going to have to get along with people, and I think we should be teaching it in schools, literally from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. It should be part of the curriculum.
And we would put resilience in that as well.
Of course, because I personally don't think you can teach resilience. I think you need to tease out the resilience, because you could crush the resilience of a kid or a family. And I think the idea is to encourage resilience by literally having kids feel as though they have a place in adults' lives. The problem's more of an adult problem anyway than it is more of a kid's problem. So I think it's that partnership that I think can help bring the resilience out of a kid.
Yeah. So adults, we come back to this. What can you do today to help a child be seen, to acknowledge them, to celebrate them? A theme that you hear often on the show. Here's your specific takeaway number 3. The story of our juvenile justice system is the story of our communities, our schools, and our kids. Be aware about how kids in your community are being treated. This is Dr. Mollie Marti. Thank you for joining Robert May and me today on Resilience Matters on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.